This mother tracked down a Los Zetas cartel member through a Facebook profile, and this mother died fighting for justice. What do these women have in common? Kidnapping is one of the means cartels make quick money. But when cartels started abducting girls from different families, they underestimated the length their mothers would go to get justice. The wrath of a mother. On January 24, 2014, Miriam Rodriguez received a call from her eldest daughter, Azalea. Miriam's younger daughter, Karen, had been abducted from her family's shop by the Los Zetas cartel. Armed with her pistol and a fake ID card, Miriam disguised as a pollster, a health worker, and an election officer to track down the cartel. This isn't a scene from a Hollywood movie. This is the story of a mother who sent 10 of her daughter's murderers to prison. Miriam's youngest daughter, Karen Alejandra Salinas Rodriguez, had been abducted by the Los Zetas cartel and was being held for a $77,000 ransom. Miriam paid the ransom, but the case went cold. A month after Karen's abduction, the kidnappers called to demand another ransom. Miriam overheard one of the cartel members call the negotiator Sama. She did some digging on her daughter's Facebook profile and found a photo tagged with Sama's name. Miriam spotted Sama months later, but he escaped. Then Miriam's son Luis spotted Sama in a shop and alerted her. This time, Sama was arrested. Miriam was tipped off about the cartel's hideout where her daughter was murdered. With the help of the Mexican Marine, they raided the ranch. A gun battle ensued, and the Marine brought down 6 members of the cartel. Miriam found her daughter's scarf on a torture bench and would later find her remains. "If you move, I'll shoot you," Miriam Rodriguez told the florist, holding a gun to his back. This was the highlight of Miriam Rodriguez's story. Miriam had been on the hunt for the cartel member known as the florist. When she found him, she held him at gunpoint for almost an hour until the police arrived. Miriam Rodriguez sent 10 members of the cartel to prison. Miriam got justice for her daughter, and so did this mother, Maricela Escobedo. A mother's sacrifice. In the early hours of a Sunday morning in 2012, a prison guard opened a cell. What he saw gave him goosebumps. The body of one of the inmates was on the floor. The dead man was Jose Enrique Jimenez Zavala, aka El Wicked, a hitman for the Los Aztecas gang. Autopsy revealed that the hitman was strangled to death. Let's rewind to the 16th of December, 2010. A middle-aged woman was holding a peaceful protest for her murdered daughter. This woman was Maricela Escobedo Ortiz, the mother of Ruby Frere, a 16-year-old who went missing in 2008. Maricela Escobedo was outside the Chihuahua State Governor's office when a car filled with masked men pulled up. The cartel's hitman, El Wicked, shot her in the head. Why did these evil men target Maricela Escobedo? Her daughter Ruby was in a relationship with Sergio Rafael Barraza Bocanegra, a member of the Los Aztecas cartel. In 2008, Ruby's boyfriend informed her parents that she had run away. A year later, Maricela's worst nightmare became a reality. Ruby's body was found in a trash bin in Ciudad Juarez. Maricela had a gut instinct that her daughter's boyfriend took her life. She tracked him down and got him arrested. Barraza confessed to the crime, but because of the power behind him, he was set free. Maricela held several protests until the case was reopened. Barraza was sentenced, and in retaliation, the cartel targeted Maricela. The hitman, El Wicked, who took Maricela's life, was sentenced to life in prison. When a child is cruelly taken from a parent, they would go to any length to get justice, even if it means putting themselves directly on the path of a cartel like Eduardo Gallo. A brutal revenge. This father, Eduardo Gallo, paid $18,500 as ransom for his daughter Paula, who was kidnapped from their weekend home. A week after the ransom was paid, Paula's body turned up. With the ransom money gone and Paula laid to rest, the case went cold. Eduardo went to neighboring towns where he believed the cartel was hiding. Posing as a second-hand clothes salesman, Eduardo got several leads about the cartel. However, there was one man he was after, Francisco Zamora, the hitman who pulled the trigger that took his daughter's life. Not long after Eduardo embarked on his quest for justice, 3 of his daughter's kidnappers were found dead. The police believed the grieving father engaged the men in a gunfight, but Eduardo wouldn't admit to this. He tracked down 3 other members of the cartel and got them arrested. Eduardo Gallo tracked the hitman through the payphone he used to demand the ransom. He was on a stakeout for weeks until the suspect showed up, perhaps to call the victim of another family to demand ransom. Eduardo called the police and kept an eye on the suspect until the police arrived. Francisco Zamora confessed to the crime and was sentenced. Another grieving father, Manuel Torres Felix's revenge was on a whole new level. A killing spree. A man was strapped to a chair. He was in a heavily soundproof room, so even though he cried for help, no one could hear him. He wished for death, but his torturer was just getting started with him. This man wasn't the first to meet such fate. In fact, within a few weeks, hundreds of Beltran Leyva cartel members faced similar ordeal and didn't live to tell the story. On the 18th of April, 2008, a car filled with masked gunmen pulled up and fired shots at a 20-year-old boy in front of his home. The victim, Atanasio Torres Acosta, was the son of a Sinaloa cartel boss, Manuel Torres Felix. Antasio was killed by a rival cartel, the Beltran Leyva cartel. After his death, his father, Felix Torres, went on a killing spree, which earned him the nickname El Ondeado, the Crazy One. Torres ambushed the suspects, took them to his home, and avenged his son's death. As the bodies piled up, so did Torres's thirst for revenge. Bosses of the rival cartel were forced to go into exile or risk losing their lives. On the 13th of October 2012, Torres, aka El Ondeado, engaged in a gun battle with the Mexican military and was killed. Moving on, decades of cartel violence led residents of a small farming village to take laws into their own hands. Taking the law into his hands. When the deadly Knights Templar cartel targeted a small farming village, they were met by strong resistance. For years, the Knights Templar cartel troubled the small farming village of La Ruana. Finally, a man stood up to the cartel. Hipólito Mora Chavez was a humble lime farmer who had had enough of the killings and their hard work being stolen. The next time members of the cartel tried to rob his farm, they were greeted by the noose of a gun. Mora's bravery emboldened other farmers who also stood up to the cartel. In revenge, the cartel killed Mora's son. However, they only awakened a sleeping beast. Now, Mora was out for revenge. Mora founded a vigilante self-defense group because he knew there was strength in numbers. Mora got the support of the Mexican troops, and the next time the cartel paid them a visit, they got the shock of their lives. Mora brought down many members of the cartel and helped the troops to flush them out of their hideouts. The cartel hadn't expected such a response from the farmers, so they were taken by surprise. They were forced to flee from the village. However, this is a child's play compared to what cartels do to its members. Bone-chilling clips of the last moments of cartel members reveal how cruel cartels are, even to their members. Disturbing last moments. In 2012, this video went viral. The two men in the video are Felix Games Garcia and Barnabas Games Castro. The first man, Garcia, used to work for the Sinaloa cartel as a drug courier. Then he brought his uncle, Barnabas Games Castro, into the cartel. Trouble started for the two when Garcia was arrested in Arizona on charges of distributing drugs. The sum of $20,000 was set for his bail, which he paid. This drew the attention of his bosses, who were curious about how he got the bail money. As soon as Garcia set foot in Mexico, he was captured by the Sinaloa cartel with his uncle. The cartel had one question for him: where did he get the money for the bail? This probe brought to light a well-kept secret between the uncle and nephew. They had stolen from the cartel. After Garcia's confession and his uncle's last word, a bone-chilling horror unfolded. Both men were executed with a chainsaw on camera. Why this payback? The Sinaloa cartel wanted to send a strong message to other members of the cartel and rival gangs to think twice before stealing from them. Drug cartel bosses believe that vengeance is a dish best served cold. When cartel boss Pablo Escobar messed with another cartel boss, he paid for it with his life. An eye for an eye. The name Pablo Escobar is one that strikes fear into the hearts of civilians and rival cartels. His reign of terror was brought to an end when he crossed paths with Fidel Castano, a rival cartel boss. Escobar murdered two of Castano's men, which made him form the paramilitary group known as Los Pepes, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar. Due to Escobar's notoriety for violence and chaos, the U.S. government and CIA supported Los Pepes. Los Pepes combed every inch of the country in search of the crime boss, leaving behind a trail of destruction. The group went after everything dear to him: his business, family, and friends. A car bomb intended for Escobar got his daughter instead, and she was severely injured. Escobar was forced to go into hiding, frustrating the efforts of the group. Luck shone on the group. In 1993, Escobar made a phone call to his son, unaware that his phone had been tapped. Armed with the latest lead about his whereabouts, the group wasted no time in going after the cartel boss. Escobar tried to escape, but he was surrounded. Now trapped, Escobar climbed to the rooftop of a building, but that didn't stop the group from coming after him. They chased him from rooftop to rooftop until they got close enough to shoot him. Afterward, Los Pepes group took a photo with the fallen crime boss. As you can see, they are full of smiles as they had just put an end to decades of terror. Unfortunately, cartel violence has continued to rise and more bodies are piling up. 68 bodies. U.S. informant Guillermo Eduardo Ramirez Peiro, aka Lalo, was implicated in the murder of over 60 bodies that were found in a cartel safe house. These murders were believed to be revenge killings, and the victims were rival cartel members who messed with Lalo and his cartel bosses. Lalo started his career as a highway patrol officer. His job brought him in close contact with drug traffickers. Soon he crossed over to the other side of the law. In 1997, the head of the Juarez cartel, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, passed away after a botched plastic surgery. A year later, a member of the cartel named Heriberto Santillan Tabares asked Lalo to work with him. Lalo became a double agent, working his way to the top of the cartel while working as an informant for the U.S. government. The house, which is located in Juarez, has been named the House of Death. The men delivering these fatal blows are Lalo and Tabares. Lalo gave the ICE information about his direct partner, Heriberto Santillan Tabares. As ICE officials started their investigation, they became suspicious of their top informant because the details of his information were one that only an insider would know. Months later, Lalo was arrested for smuggling over 100 pounds of marijuana into Mexico. His friends at ICE got the charges dropped, but little did they know, this was the least of Lalo's crimes. A footage of him offing a victim surfaced, and not long after, Lalo and his partner Tabares went on a crime rampage. For months, these two men terrorized rival cartels. A total of 68 bodies were reported to have been found in the safe house Lalo and Tabares took their victims to. This discovery sealed his fate. Lalo was finally sentenced. Although there are corrupt officers in Mexico's armed forces, the Marine is one of the least corrupt forces that has continued to wage war against cartels. The Marine versus cartels. For decades, cartels have troubled Mexican residents. Although the Mexican authorities have been in pursuit of these cartels, the system is filled with corrupt officers. More cartels sprung up while the authorities' resources dried up. As a result of the limited resources and double agents in the system, innocent Mexicans paid for the cartels' greed with their lives. The cartels continued to get away with crimes until a new force rose up to the challenge: the Mexican Marine. Mexican Marines led numerous raids that brought cartel bosses down on their knees, and many were exiled or executed. Just as the cartels have terrorized Mexican citizens for years, the Marines are their nightmare. Even now, there's a name that strikes fear in the heart of cartel bosses: El Marino Loco. Eric Morales Guevara, aka El Marino Loco, is a mysterious Marine officer who humiliates cartels. He forces captured cartel bosses to dress as women and makes them kiss while he makes fun of them. One time, he broke into the home of Silvestre Haro Rodriguez, El Chive, the leader of the Gulf Cartel, and stole the ashes of the cartel boss's late father. El Marino Loco got into trouble with his commanders for his unusual method of bringing cartel bosses to justice, so he formed his own anti-drug group. In this video, El Marino Loco crashed the party of a top cartel boss. He commands everyone to lie on the floor and asks if anyone has a gun on them. He strikes those who are slow to comply and later shoots several of the cartel members off camera. El Marino may be just one man, but in another Mexican city, it was the mothers who led the siege. Mothers who dare. The residents of the town of Cherán, Mexico, did not only have to endure the maltreatment meted on them by cartels, but they also had to deal with illegal loggers. In 2011, the women of this town, mothers, sisters, and wives, were tired of the situation. One of the women, a single mother, Adelaida Sanchez, studied systems engineering, but due to the constant violence against women in her town, 15 days after her graduation, she joined the local police force. Why did the cartels take interest in Cherán's forests? To make profits. In the course of doing this, many women came face to face with the cartel bosses and suffered horrible fate at their hands. Seeing how powerless the men in this town were, the cartel mocked the women to their faces. "We are going to finish with your forest and then carry on with your women." It was this statement that made the women defend themselves and their forests. The Talamantes, illegal loggers, opened shots in the early hours of the 15th of April 2011, but the women didn't back down. They blocked the entryway to their town and reached for whatever weapon they could lay hands on. These brave women covered their faces and chased the cartel with machetes and logs of wood. They took over the streets, and this encouraged their men to join the uprising. This was a new beginning for the women of Cherán. Let's go down memory lane to the time another cartel messed with the wrong person. Messed with the wrong one. February 7, 1985, DEA agent Kiki Camarena walked out of the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara, Mexico, into an ambush. His kidnappers were members of the Guadalajara cartel. DEA agent Kiki had been in pursuit of the cartel for years. He tipped off law enforcement agents in Mexico about Rancho Bufalo in late 1984. Rancho Bufalo was a marijuana plantation run by the Guadalajara cartel. It brought in about $8 billion per year in revenue. The ranch was raided, and 5,000 tons of marijuana worth $2 billion were destroyed. The DEA agent was working on exposing more cartels when he was kidnapped and murdered by Guadalajara cartel boss Rafael Caro Quintero. However, Kiki's death wasn't for nothing. They declared war on drugs and cartels because of the wicked manner in which Kiki's Camarena's life was taken. The U.S. government launched Operation Leyenda to bring justice to those who murdered the DEA agent. Guadalajara leader Quintero and 4 members of the cartel were arrested for the murder. The U.S. government fished out corrupt Mexican officials who aided in Kiki's kidnapping. The DEA, now backed by the U.S. government, began to use force against the cartels. Just like the DEA, more civilians have joined the fight against cartels. One of such brave people was a 77-year-old rancher taking up arms. Most people work hard in their youth so they can retire in old age. But a wish as simple as this is impossible if you live in a community ruled by cartels. November 13, 2010, a 77-year-old man, Alejo Garza Tamez, was given 24 hours by the Los Zetas cartel to leave his home. Imagine how heartbreaking it is to do manual work as a child. In your father's sawmill to buy a ranch which you grew into a successful farm, only to be told you have 24 hours to vacate your land. The Los Zetas cartel threatened to harm Don Alejo if he was on the ranch when they returned. However, he looked them in the eyes and said he would be waiting. When the cartel's truck sped out of sight, the old man rounded up his workers and told them to take the weekend off. He went into his cellar, grabbed a rifle, a stack of ammunition, and waited. At the break of dawn, a truck rumbled in the distance, but the elderly farmer was waiting with a rifle in each hand. The cartel fired the first shot to scare him off, but to their shock, Don Alejo fired back at them. Before they could get over their shock, more shots sounded. Don Alejo took cover by the side of his windows, aimed, and brought down his targets. He got 4 of the cartel members, but they regrouped and outnumbered him. In the end, Don Alejo went down, but he wounded 2 of the men and killed 4 of them. Just like Don Alejo, other real-life vigilantes took it upon themselves to cleanse the streets of cartels. Social cleansing. In the ADS, a 30-year-old man was sleeping next to his wife when heavy footsteps woke them up. Before he could reach for his gun, the lights flickered on and he shivered when he saw the men dressed in all black with a bandana over their faces. These men were members of a group known as Sombra Negra. They were a group of vigilantes who kept the streets free from violence. They blindfolded the man, tied his hands behind his back, and took him away. By morning, the group lined him up alongside other members of the MS-13 cartel on the street and opened fire on them while the residents watched. El Salvador's Mara Salvatrucha cartel, known as MS-13, was one of the deadly cartels in the ADS. The cartel bullied residents of El Salvador's communities for years, until a savior rose up for the people, Sombra Negra. The group delivered quick judgment to members of cartels, especially the MS-13 cartel, without trial. Members of the cartel were executed in their homes, streets, and many mysteriously vanished. This was an act Sombra Negra described as social cleansing. These extreme measures put a stop to the criminal activities of the cartel. The group had the support of the head of the National Assembly, Guillermo Gallegos. Guillermo Gallegos once said that, "Morally, I support this type of expression because people are tired of the way of delinquency." However, violence and vengeance seems to be the only language cartels understand. In recent times, a cartel left a trail of body parts in Mexico City to send a warning to rivals. Brutal cartel vengeance. In the early hours of a Wednesday morning, screams echoed from a pedestrian bridge in Toluca, west of Mexico City. The reason for this chaos is a severed human leg hanging off the bridge. This is clearly the work of a cartel, and the Familia Michoacana cartel was credited for this morbid act. This is a tactic that many cartels have embraced, not only to get the attention of rival cartels, but to make it difficult for civilians to stand up to them. To compete for dominance, the Gulf cartel started executing rival Los Zetas members on camera. It is hard to believe believe that Los Zetas used to be an arm of the Gulf Cartel. It broke away from the Gulf Cartel in 2010 after growing in power and dominance. In 2007, Los Zetas was Mexico's most technologically advanced and violent cartel. However, the cartel lost its dominance because of internal and external conflicts. For weeks, there were daily shootouts between the rival cartels, which left scores of bodies in Mexican cities. Here's the reason behind the Gulf Zeta split. Gulf Cartel leader Jorge L. Casas Eduardo Costilla Sanchez ordered the murder of Victor Concord III Pena Mendoza, a Zeta captain. After Victor's death on January 18th, the Zeta's second-in-command, Miguel L. Correnta Treveno, ordered the Gulf Cartel to hand over the killer. Since the Gulf Cartel didn't heed to their command, the Zetas kidnapped 16 Gulf Cartel members. This was the start of the Great War between the cartels. Other factions of the Gulf Cartel are just as deadly as their founding fathers, and they do not hesitate to turn against even their own members. Scorpion Cartel turns in members. When 4 Americans crossed into Matamoros from Texas for cosmetic surgery, they had no idea what was waiting for them. Members of the Scorpion Cartel, a faction of the Gulf Cartel, opened fire on them. A stray bullet hit a Mexican woman, Arely Pablo Servando, killing her on the spot. The 4 friends were kidnapped, but 2 of them lost their lives, while one of the survivors was shot in the leg. Investigations were ongoing when one of the vehicles that the authorities had been looking for turned up. Inside, there were 5 men lying face down with their hands tied behind them. A letter from the Scorpion Cartel was found in the vehicle. "We have decided to turn over those who were directly involved and responsible in the events, who at all times acted under their own decision-making and lack of discipline," the letter reads, adding that the suspects went against the cartel's rules, which include respecting the life and well-being of the innocent. Why did the cartel snitch on its members? They wanted to make peace with the law enforcement agents, as this could affect their business. This was also an act of punishment, because the suspects acted on their own. Since the kidnapping and murders of 2 of the Americans, the Special Forces and National Guard troops have been patrolling the streets. It's this type of heat the cartel was trying to avoid, as the Marine has started using brutal force against cartels. Heavy-handed tactics. In this security camera footage, a vehicle loses control and crashes into a chain-link fence. The scene takes a dark turn as an armed military vehicle pulls up. Soldiers march towards the vehicle with guns drawn and pull out the men in the vehicle. The soldiers line up the men who are unarmed against the fence and rain bullets on them. For years, there have been confrontations between the Mexican armed forces and cartels which resorted to losses on both sides. So, the military started deploying heavy tactics and strategies to win the battle against the drug cartels. After the video surfaced, Mexico's defense ministry states that the cartel members were killed during a confrontation. However, as seen in the clip, the men were not armed. During a press conference, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador confirmed that the shooting in the video was an execution. The president was against it, as it was extreme and unlawful. "Apparently, there was an execution, and that cannot be allowed," López Obrador said. "These are isolated cases, and when they occur, they are punished. It was excessive force, violence, seeking to confront violence with violence. All this has to be banished because it was introduced in the neoliberal period." Mexican authorities are outspoken about the drug war in the country, but there is another issue that has not been given the same attention: the penalty for speaking against cartels. The fight for freedom of expression. On the 18th of June, 2021, one of the cartel hitmen, Picos Barrueta, who killed journalist Javier Valdez, was sentenced to 32 years in prison. This was the second sentencing in the case. The first court trial was held in 2020, and the second hitman, Heriberto Picos Barraza, alias El Koala, was sentenced to 14 years. The third suspect, Luis Sanchez, aka El Diablo, was found dead months after the journalist's death. Valdez and his wife Griselda Triana were the voice of the people for decades. Through their investigative newspaper, Rio Dutch, the couple exposed the dark activities of cartels. On the 15th of May 2017, Griselda's husband Valdez was shot outside of their media house, and the case quickly became cold. She took a few months off work to mourn her husband, but during this time, she decided to get justice for her husband. Griselda told her children to stay out of the spotlight, and she became the face of the protest that would lead to the sentencing of 2 of her husband's murderers. In his lifetime, Valdez covered crime beats and had the support of his wife, as she believed that the truth must be told. In the end, exposing the truth got her husband killed, but Griselda has continued to fight for freedom of expression in a country dominated by cartels who would do anything to keep the truth hidden. A mother's maternal instinct to protect her child and community surpasses any threat from drug cartels. That is why, despite the danger, Mexican mothers and women have continued to fight back against cartels. If you enjoyed watching this video and would love to see more true crime videos like this, then go ahead and click on any of the cards on your screen.